Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, please subscribe. I'd really love that. If you're returning, how you doing? What we're going to talk about today is Fukushima. 12 years after the nuclear disaster, Japan began releasing some of the contaminated water from the plant into the Pacific Ocean. And despite widespread opposition, the government and plant operators TEPCO, T-E-P-C-O, went ahead with the plan and carefully vetted by the UN atomic regulator. So Japan used water to cool the plant's reactors when it went into the meltdown in 2011. And this highly radioactive water was then treated and collected in tanks every single day, but the site was running out of storage space. And it was treated to remove all of the radioactive elements except for tritium, and that's Tritium, which is very difficult to remove. And the water was diluted to reduce radioactivity to 1500, not sure what this word is, I can't even pronounce it, but I'll spell it out for you, BECQUERELS, and that's per liter, far below the drinking water standard of 10,000 BQL. So there are citizens that are protesting in Japan and South Korea as well, but China's government came out swinging, labeling Japan as selfish and irresponsible. And it was also imposed a ban on all seafood from Japan. So Thursday's release was the first of 4 scheduled between now and the end of March of 2024. And the entire process is going to take about 30 years. Yeah. So Tokyo Electric Power Company, known as TEPCO, owns the Fukushima nuclear plant, which suffered a nuclear meltdown after it was damaged by the earthquake and the tsunami in March of 2011. And TEPCO is the 4th largest power company in the world. They supply about 1/3 of Japan's electricity in the biggest cities. And it has faced billions of dollars in compensation claims since the disaster, with bankruptcy fears forcing the government to take control in 2012. And then in 2014, they were sued by Fukushima workers over unpaid hazard pay. Then 2 years later, TEPCO admitted that it should have announced sooner that there was a nuclear meltdown at the site. Then last year, former executives were ordered to pay 13 trillion yen for failing to prevent the disaster. And then a legal group they filed a petition to South Korea's constitutional court to stop the release of the Fukushima water on behalf of more than 40,000 people and 160 whales. So Kim Young-hee, H-E-E, of the Lawyers for a Democratic Society, argues that South Korean government's reaction to the release of the is unconstitutional, as it fails to protect the rights of the citizens. And the whales are listed as petitioners because they are unidentifiable and their survival rate is at stake. So unusually, it takes about 5 years for South Korea's top court to rule on such cases. However, the case was worth pursuing because the water release is continued for 30 years. So last week, a court in Korean city of Busan, it's B-U-S-A-N, dismissed a case filed by more than 160 groups against Fukushima's operators because it was beyond its jurisdiction. Yeah. And in its latest statement, the UN's atomic watchdog said that the tritium concentration in the Fukushima water release is well below the operation limit. And the tritium is a radioactive isotope of hydrogen. It's the most common form. It is tritated water, which can be found all over the world in the water. And the IAEA, which has a permanent office at Fukushima, said an independent on-site analysis has shown that the tritium concentration in the water discharged was far below the operational limit. So the limit is 40 times lower than the Japanese national safety standard for the tritium levels in water, and around 7 times lower than the limit set by the WHO for drinking water. The Fukushima issue has been fiercely politicized in South Korea, as is often the case for matters considering Japan. and the government has all but endorsed the release of the water while the opposition is fiercely against it. In recent weeks, there have been protesters out on the street while the government held press conferences and made YouTube videos to try to convince the public that the water has been discharged and it is safe. Now, over the past year, President Yoon Suk-yeol has made considerable progress with his attempts to improve the country's strained relationship with Japan. And last week's summit between Yoon and Japan's Prime Minister and the U.S. President was proof of that. And Yoon does not want all of his hard work undone over all of this. And the opposition claims that Yoon has compromised people's health for the sake of this relationship. But the government says that the opposition is scaremongering to win votes ahead of next year's election. Now, a lot of people are saying that the water release just shows that the ongoing impact of the 2011 Fukushima meltdown is the world's worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl. Yep. And just over 7% of Japan's electric power is generated by nuclear energy. Just before 2011, the figure stood at 30%. So the Fukushima disaster prompted anti-nuclear protests across the country. And the government halted all nuclear power plants, and the move resulted in a rise in electricity prices, with the then boss of TEPCO, which owns the Fukushima power plant, warning of further hikes. Now, nuclear energy remains deeply decisive topic, but the public sentiment has started to shift, and many lawmakers are now pushing to restart the rest of Japan's nuclear power plants. It coincides with Japan's aim to be carbon neutral by 2050, because as of now, Japan still relies heavily on fossil fuels like oil and coal and liquefied natural gas, most of which are imported from overseas and vulnerable to market price changes. So fear and anger has also intensified on China's social media, with the Twitter-like platform, it's called Weibo, W-E-I-B-O, publishing new posts on the move by the second. And some users are worried right now that eating seafood could harm even future generations. They said, why isn't the world concerned about the release of radioactive water into the oceans? This isn't just a question of whether seafood is safe to eat. The circulation of currents means this will affect the whole world, and they're right. So China is known for censoring social media posts, which does not align with the state's position. And Weibo, the poll for reactions on Tokyo's move, included just these options: that it violates international consensus and maritime protection laws, it goes against common sense and human nature, and it damages the environment. Yeah. So fishermen in South Korea have long been opposed to release the water, but again, not because they thought it was unsafe, but because they worry that people would stop buying their fish. And after the disaster in 2011, South Korea banned the sale of seafood from around Fukushima. And the fishermen feared that once the water was released into the ocean and free to make its way to South Korea's seas, their catch would also be tainted. And there's been immediate concerns about the safety of seafood now, and China has just banned all Japanese fish imports. But experts are now concerned about the effects of treated water on seafood. They say it has no basis on scientific evidence. So now China has decided to completely suspend seafood from all of Japan, expanding on an existing ban on seafood from Fukushima and some surrounding prefectures. So now, in a statement, it's customs the customs office says that it is to protect the health of the Chinese consumers. Well, that's awesome, but you know, this is what they actually said: in order to comprehensively prevent the food safety risks of radioactive contamination, protect the health of Chinese consumers, and ensure the safety of imported food, the General Administration of Customs has decided to completely suspend the import of aquatic products including live aquatic animals, originating in Japan from August 24th of 2023 from China Customs Office in order to comprehensively prevent the food safety risk of radioactive contamination, protect the health of Chinese consumers, and ensure the safety of imported food. The General Admission of Customs has decided to completely suspend. So this, last chance to get any and all seafood, because in a survey that was done just last month, almost 2/3 of people said that they would eat less seafood or no seafood at all if the water was released. And now the fishermen's fear has become a reality, and they are urging the government to support them financially. So authorities have promised to monitor the water closely, and it will test all the local seafood for radiation every single day, and test the water in real time for more than 200 locations. And as Hong Kong declared a ban yesterday on seafood imports from 10 prefectures in Japan, sushi lovers in the Chinese territory grabbed their last chance, literally, to taste the freshly delivered raw fish slices, or sashimi. And there's been a great deal of anger and anxiety today in Fukushima because local fishermen are worried about the perception and have called it a second disaster for their livelihoods after the meltdown. So this is, like a whirlwind of crazy. And it's so sad because, they're going to release this water regardless of whose lives it affects, whose livelihoods it affects. They don't care. And it's so, so sad. All right, guys, I'm out of here. All right, I will see you in the next one. Okay, you stay safe, you stay positive, you keep prepping. And as always, fear less. Ciao.